Oh, why don't you leave them alone? Your average Christian just wants to practice their faith in private, be a good person. They'd never persecute anybody. And I might say in response, sure, it might seem that we here at the ACA target Christians particularly and sort of go after them with less than great intentions, you might think, but, it is for a reason. Now, I could go into the usual stuff about how belief informs action, and it's the consequences of those actions that I am compelled to be interested in. So therefore, your beliefs are interesting to me. But besides that, I'm going to give you guys, you theists, you believers, credit, benefit of the doubt. You know what bad looks like. You know what good looks like. And if someone in your in-group was being bad, you'd want to call them out, would you not? I go by many monikers: gamer, nerd, atheist, weeaboo, British, whatever you want to call me. But those are titles I tie myself to. And if someone espousing what those titles refer to is acting up, I'm going to call them out, be it the misogynist gamer or the atheist calling the believer mentally ill. I will call those out. So to you I say, can you defend what you believe in? Is it for a good reason? And if you feel that we are unduly assaulting an idea that you hold, but you don't have a good answer to, then you may have already lost. But if you think you know different, give us a call, because the show starts now.
All right. Well, hello and welcome to Talk Heathen. I am excited to be here. Today is September 1st, 2024. I'll be Christy Powell hosting here with my good dear friend, Jaimie Forbes. Jaimie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's fantastic, though. I am still reeling from last weekend's revelries. I feel like my body... I'm not 18 anymore, man. I'm not.
No, I hear it. We all had a wonderful time on the back cruise. I hope that everybody will be keeping their eyes open and looking for that weekend when it comes around at the end of next summer. Because, yeah, even though we didn't see a ton of bats and the cruise didn't do a whole lot of cruising, we did a fair amount of boozing, a good bit of hobnobbing, and had a pretty good goddamn time.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of those conversations, though, might be a little bit surprising to an outsider. Obviously the stereotype is, oh, you arrogant atheists gathering around to congratulate yourselves on how good your brains are or whatever. But it really isn't. One of the things about our community is that we want to try and keep ourselves honest. So when I gave that challenge to believers at the start of the show, I will hold myself to the same rigor. You can trust me on that, and hold me to that rigor yourselves as well. But no, it wasn't like a big old backslapping bonhomie of aren't we so clever. It's more like, oh my goodness, why do people actually listen to us?
Yeah, it was a good mix of people, and I do appreciate that about our community, particularly the show hosts. It's rare that I really get an opportunity to just grab a beer with J Mike and with Secular Rarity and Forrest Valkai and some of these amazing thinkers and incredible folks. And to a person, each one of them is sort of like, I'm socially awkward. I don't know what to say. So I hope that there is a little bit of grace when we do go out live on air and try to put our best foot forward. But nevertheless, I very much appreciate that when we're all sitting at a table, like last week when we did this very show and I got to be on air and people would call in about things that, one or the other of us might have an area of specialization in, that everybody did kind of hang back and was like, no, talk to that guy. It's not all about my voice. So I hope that we have something to offer here. I hope that our callers have something to offer here, or some meaningful desire to better understand our world. We do these shows for a reason, and it's not just to talk about how smart we are or aren't, or just to hear our own voices, but to hopefully get some good information out into the world. Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. There are so many implications to those ideas. Why do we hassle these poor Christians who just want to live their faith out on their own? Well, we do it because we want to be having meaningful conversations about what is the best direction for our culture. Is it making sure that the 10 commandments are being hung in our classrooms? Or is it in making sure that we are getting a good, well-rounded, science-based, evidence-based education? There are meaningful implications to that question. What kind of restrictions should we be having on adult content, violence in film, pornography? All of these kinds of things really do come back to what do you believe and why? And I hope that there are some folks out there who maybe believe differently than us, who maybe have questions about what we believe, about why we believe it, but more than anything, people who really want to put forth their notions on what we as a society maybe ought to be doing. I'm just hoping to have some great conversations today, Jaimie. Is there anybody in particular that you are hoping will call in? Is there an idea that you feel that we need to explore, or something that you want to make sure that we are making some space for today? If some caller is maybe sitting on the fence wondering if their topic is interesting, is there a topic that would be interesting to you, Jaimie?
Anywhere that faith intersects with health is something that I'm interested in.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I will warn anyone calling in on that kind of topic. I do have a strong bias against spiritual healing from both a scientific and personal perspective.
Sure.
But I will try and meet everything with as open a mind as I can.
Well, and in the parlance of the show, like, I can't help but want to question every definition in that sentence. Like, what are we talking about when we talk about spiritual healing? What are we talking about when we use the word spiritual? That is one of those words that gets sort of bandied about without a lot of clear definition. And I think that there is a lot for us to get into. So I hope that we can get into it. I hope that you listening now live will help, because Talk Heathen is a live call-in show. We do have open lines. You can get your calls in right now at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. While those calls are coming in, and before we jump right into it, what do you say we go back to the question of the week, our Talk Heathen to Me segment from last week? Last week, I, in fact, had the privilege of asking you, what's a lyric that you wouldn't expect in Christian music? And here are our top 3 answers. Our number 3 answer came from Mr. Foghorn66, who said, a lyric you wouldn't expect in Christian music comes from Ezekiel 19-21 from the NIV, where it says, there she lusted after her lovers, whose genitals were like those of donkeys, and whose emissions was like that of a horse.
I don't know. I think there's some 80s hair metal in there somewhere.
There is definitely some hair metal in this idea.
Horse? Yeah.
So you longed for the lewdness of your youth, when in Egypt your bosom was caressed, and your young breast fondled. Yeah, even when I'm being sort of mocky about it, I don't love hearing those words come out of my mouth. That's some good Bible right there.
Yeah, it's a bit it's all about context. Yeah, okay, fine, but man, those definitely would make some Motley Crue lyrics. I tell you that.
Well, our number 2 favorite answer came from Chuck Guidos, who said, improbable lyrics. Jesus hates me, this I know, so my tumors tells me so. Though it's simple surgery, folks would rather pray for me. Ooh, that's got some cutting edge to it.
That's right up my alley. I work adjacent to cancer in my day job.
Mm-hmm.
I have very strong feelings about it. And yes, one of my major standpoints in the whole problem of evil is cancer, because we don't cause it for a lot of it. It's just a thing. It's a design flaw in our bodies. We're all on the clock right now. You right now at home, you have cancer cells in you, but your immune system is very good at killing them. And why would a good God design this system that we're all on this time bomb clock, and some people meet it far far too early. Like, what did that 6-month-old do to deserve a glioblastoma?
Heard. Yeah, no, and it can get pretty wild. Some of the explanations. I mean, we can talk about the problem of evil and all of these things, but I mean, my wife asked me the other day. She was like, "You studied the Bible a little bit more than me. You grew up in all of this evangelical kind of craziness. How did Methuselah live to be almost 1,000?" And I kind of started spewing out some of the explanations I was given as a kid about the firmament and about how we were being protected from the sun's rays before Noah's flood. And God decided to, it got pretty wild. And I think I lost her after about 5 seconds of lore, trying to explain all of the crazy justifications that I grew up with.
It's like, do you live by cell division? Are you over 120 years old? Go to Vegas. Go to Vegas now.
Yeah.
You are the luckiest person on the planet.
Well, and a call out for you, Jaimie, in our number one answer. Our favorite answer from this week came from Onio saying, a lyric you wouldn't expect in Christian music, foreskin, the forbidden calamari. Thanks, Jaimie, for that one. I will say you said that last week on air, and I have not been able to get it out of my head. No, thank you for that.
The forbidden calamari.
Yeah,
I'm not a musician.
I mean, it's good work. It's good work either way. We do appreciate everybody who answered and everybody who jumped in. We have a question for this week. And Jaimie, I'm going to ask you this here in just a second, but I'll acknowledge this was kind of a tricky one for me. The question is, what's an unexpected place for Jesus to appear? People listening can answer in the comments and maybe be featured on next week's episode. I'll say when I was trying to answer this question for myself, every answer that I came up with was like, well, Jesus would never be caught dead in a bar or in a brothel or something like this. And then I started to think about it. Well, maybe not cultural Jesus, maybe not the Jesus that evangelicals put in front of us every day, but Jesus of the Bible was absolutely hanging out in these kinds of places. So maybe a bit of a trick question there. What kind of response do you have in mind, Jaimie?
Well, there's a whole slew of comments I can make about the kind of people who would claim they saw Jesus and how they actually live their lives. But anyway, So as I was sitting there with a pretty little girl there taking her unmentionables off in front of me, I could not help but notice that the size, shape, and proportions of her little cornhole definitely suited the face and features of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try to hold it together after that one. I'm going to jump to the crew cam here in just a moment, but first read a quick super chat.
His face is like, oh, Jaimie, why did you say those words in that way?
We've got a super chat here from William Matz, who says, can you give me a reason on why beer sucks? Muhahaha, fight me, bros. Bro hoof to Jaimie, sup to Christy. Hope y'all are doing great. I want tacos. I want some tacos too. I'm on board with a lot of that. Why does beer suck? Beer sucks because you do not have the adult palate to endure a little bit of discomfort while you learn to acquire a taste, he said condescendingly to the audience, and justification of enjoying beer. I love my beer. What can I say?
Yeah, same here, but it is an acquired taste. And take it from someone who says it every day, it's literal poison. It is killing you.
No,
I do it anyway, knowing that's the fact, you know.
Yeah, I mean, when a substance has an addictive quality to it, our body will go through all kinds of mental tricks to try and convince us that we like it. When there's no objective reason why something that we describe as being like full of hay or mustiness is delicious. And yet it somehow is, because I like to let my brain be fooled sometimes. I think that's a little bit what we're here to talk about. So we're going to get into it in just a second. Before we take our first couple of calls, I do want to thank our incredible crew. Give them a moment to get up here on the screen so we can see some shiny, wonderful faces. So many hardworking people, not just the ones depicted here, who do so much to make this show happen. Really grateful to you for all of your help. And with that, Jaimie, are you ready to jump into our first call?
Yeah, where are we going, man?
All right, let's do it. Let's talk to Mike in Ohio, who has some questions about this notion of faith healing. Mike, what is on your mind today?
Hey, Christy, Jaimie, thank you so much for taking my call. It's great talking to you all. So I was thinking, just my spirituality, I would identify as pagan, panentheist, agnostic. Okay. So with faith healing, you'll hear people from different faiths talk about, let's say you take addiction, for instance, talk about how this deity, Jesus or whoever, has taken this addiction from them. I would never tell somebody to forego, to not seek medical treatment. And, you know, if like I was telling the screen caller, you know, with the placebo effect, there's still an effect. But, you know, you can take somebody who doesn't go, who stays secular, who goes through a, like AA or NA, and that would take the addiction from them as well. So, but if you focus it on a deity and you get some type of result, then there would be an effect, Jaimie.
Well, functionality does not prove truthfulness. Like if I believe real hard this lucky rabbit's foot's going to give me luck, and I get luck, then that's fine. There are a lot of fallacial pitfalls that you have in front of you, unfortunately, things like the Texas sharpshooter, where you essentially make the data fit the model you want. There's a lot of that, cherry picking, etc. Now, I do understand that there are benefits to what you might call alternative treatments. And that's why in the medical field, we don't call it alternative treatment if it is provided in concert with standard treatment. It's called integrative medicine. And it allows for the use and exploration of non-standard treatment vectors without putting the patient's life in danger, because they're going to continue with the standard treatments as well. Of course, the treatments have to be proven to be safe. They don't necessarily have to be proven to be effective. So what do you think of that?
Okay, so I hope this is answering that. Let's, like, for me, okay, if I've had a particularly bad day, if I am suffering with, well, not suffering, if I'm experiencing some type of depression, and I go out into nature and I meditate and I get a dopamine release and I feel better, then I've had an effect.
Yeah, how you feel is how you feel. It's true. Yeah, I mean, your mind is a big part of your body. You know, however we want to slice it, whether we want to describe the mind as the brain or whether we can have a more sophisticated understanding of our entire neurosystem and how all of this works together. I mean, I'm a therapist. Like everything I do could in some form or fashion be described as a placebo. You know, I'm helping people talk through their issues as a way of changing their frame of mind so that they feel better. You know, in addition to that, like I'm trained in hypnotherapy. Hypnosis is all about the study of focus. It's all about focusing on which beliefs are actually benefiting you and serving you and which beliefs are causing you to have some form of distress. I don't know that we're saying different things here. If we want to say that so much of health and wellness and experiences of joy or fulfillment or satisfaction versus anxiety and depression and distress, if we want to say that the difference between those things is really just how you think about them or what's going on in your head, cool. Yeah, I'm more or less on board with all of that. When we talk about faith healing, the concern that we are presenting here is that, yeah, people can have positive experiences. And to a certain degree, I don't care what kind of medicine is helping you to get better, to feel better. But the danger comes from people making really outlandish, unsubstantiated claims about how their faith is necessary to heal them. And then people don't get those positive results. You know, I have a mother who is disabled, who has lived with chronic pain her entire life. And I have watched countless people stand over her, laying hands on her, praying for her, praying in tongues, doing all of this like really wild shit to try and heal her injuries. And some non-zero amount of time, it may have helped her to feel better. But so many times she walked out of those experiences still disabled, still with chronic pain, and now with the added burden of being told by her culture, by her community, that her pain was her fault, that her pain was her lack of faith in God, that her pain was because she just didn't have what it took for God to really want to give her that gift of healing. And that led to incredible depression, that led to incredible guilt, and is certainly something that I would never want anybody to experience, whether they are paying money for these so-called faith healers or not. That is a awful, awful experience. So it takes the whole question of faith healing and acknowledges that there can be incredible damage to it, not just because it doesn't always work, and not just because it can cause demonstrable harm, but also because it can prevent people from pursuing the medical avenues that potentially would benefit them. How does all that strike you?
Understood. I actually agree with you on that. I was trying to make a conversation here.
Sure.
Well, I appreciate your all's time. I might have been a bad call. I really agree with you guys. I was just trying to make a conversation. But Christy, Jaimie, I love your all's show. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Hey, thank you. I apologize if it seemed like I shut you down there. I just want to be really mindful of the fact that, yeah, our thoughts can be beneficial, but they can be harmful.
Yeah, that is the case. And the thing is that anytime faith healing alone is tested, it turns out to be no better than a coin flip. And again, it's thin. Yes, I know thin end of the wedge is a fallacy, and that you can be suckered into thinking that any small problem is going to cause big problems later. But the kinds of mind patterns, the kinds of thinking patterns you have to engage in to believe that something like faith healing is going to work will lead you down potentially dark paths. It leaves you open, vulnerable to people who would tell you one thing that's comfortable that isn't true, but seems like it should be, and then leech off that to make you do terrible things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does just come down to what is it that these ideas are pushing us towards, and are those things healthful? You know, yeah, the way that you think about things is very powerful. It is very important. And I would like to be thinking about things in a way that is grounded in reality, that is verifiable, that is testable, that is replicable, because I'm much more likely to come to ideas, to come to treatment strategies, to come to beliefs and notions that are going to reliably cause beneficial impact. So if you're good there, Jaimie, I think we can go ahead and speak to Dee in Iowa, yeah?
Well, before we do that, we do that, I'd like to jump in and grab a super chat that just came in from William Mattis. 5 of your American dollars. Enjoy your mildly alcoholic liquid bread. I'll take whiskey, gin, vodka, anything else like a person who shoots liquor because I'm not a man. Lol. I wanted to give a couple of comments in this. One, enjoy responsibly. 2, know that it is a poison. And 3, that's another thing that needs to be broken down about this whole patriarchy flipping nonsense. Manly drinks versus girly drinks. Like
your identity is not defined by your choice in beverage.
Yeah, why don't you just I'm going to have this fruity sweet cocktail. Why? Because it's tasty and I'm going to get a buzz off it. Nothing more sinister than that.
Yeah, suffering in order to prove your masculinity is not benefiting anybody. I mean, nobody's life is made better because they're taking shots of gut rot whiskey just to prove that they can.
I'm a man.
All right, well, let's see what Dee has to say about altered brain chemistry. Dee, what's on your mind today?
Hi there, guys. Nice to speak with you. My thought comes from an experience that I had as a child, and a short take on YouTube where a psychiatrist was talking about, how cortisol will set up the fight or flight response. And if you're in a situation of parental abuse and you're too little to either fight or flight, you go into freeze. And your whole brain chemistry just kind of cascades down into one tight ball of trauma. And I had an experience like that, and I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about that because I have been thinking for a while that, we don't, we understand more about the brain than, biblical times did, and the chemistry in that. I'm wondering if we can experience spiritual things as a result of certain chemical status of your brain. I don't know if I'm saying this right. Does that make sense?
No. Yeah, I mean, so everything that you're describing about trauma and some of these other ideas broadly tracks, and you're right on point. And I would certainly say that, yes, like some spiritual experiences are due to the like the neurochemicals in our brain and all of these kinds of things. But then again, so is literally everything else. If you are looking at a puppy and it makes you smile, if you are looking at a cloud and you see a face, if you are just watching TV or doing your taxes, all of your feelings, all of your sensations are really just appearances in consciousness that are moderated by all of these different neurotransmitters that exist inside of your brain. So when we start to see sort of weird experiences, when we start to see things that maybe don't comport with reality, then yeah, we start to look at, well, is there some form of trauma? Is there something that is maybe out of balance? Is there a overactive or underactive neurological pathway that is causing this to sort of throw things amok? But I think it's really important to recognize that sometimes these things don't work, quote unquote, correctly, but everything that we ever experience ever is just these things working. Every feeling you've ever had, every sight or sound, every sensation, all of it is really just an appearance in consciousness that is moderated by these same neurotransmitters, these same chemicals that we're talking about here.
Okay. And I know I was part of a charismatic congregation for several years.
Heard.
And, of course, being filled with the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues, and slain in the Spirit, blah, 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 all of that. I know that the church experience is actually built to take one to psychologically more susceptible to, being emotionally open, and that my experience with that, like I said, I had a really negative childhood experience as a result of trauma. I don't know if you want me to tell you about that or not. But in all of my time in that charismatic church, I was one of the ones that faked it to fit in.
Sure, I hear that.
It's understandable. I wanted to go down a certain route with this because the original thought was, can someone come to a quote unquote spiritual experience through, be it drugs or trauma or some kind of alteration of their neurochemical state? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Right. I just want to make sure that we're clear on terms here. Firstly, a spiritual experience. I need to know more about what that would be. Is that an experience that cannot occur conceivably within the experiencer's experience of the natural world. It's something outside their common experience of the natural world.
Okay. Well,
that sounds about right. Okay.
I was in the middle of an abuse event, I guess you'd call it. Mm-hmm. It was very intense. I had no way to escape, and I had a vision of Jesus. And at first I thought, oh God, at first it was like, oh, thank God, he's here. He's going to protect me. I'm going to be okay. But all I got was this soul-crushing sense of disappointment. And there was no help. There was no redemption. Mm-hmm. And when I came out of that vision, my mother was trying to haul me up off my knees and shouting, are you okay? Are you okay? And that's been with me for 60 years now.
As it would be. And so you've gone into a lot of detail, and we appreciate you for being brave to do so as the reasons why the trauma exists, and that you felt that you had what could have been construed as experience with Jesus, but it was very disappointing because no help was forthcoming. So do you want the spiritual to be true?
I'm kind of in transition. Right now, I'm very Buddhist in my leanings. I've spent a lot of time in the pagan community. And
what I would say here, just let me get this out. You shouldn't want anything to be true. You should try to get to a space where you accept what is proven to be true, regardless of how you feel about it. And that's the thing that I'd want to try and drill down on, that you obviously have a lot of trauma in your past, more than we could ever unpack. I'm hoping you have some professional help with that. But the need for there to be some supernatural force out there, maybe some reason why that trauma had to happen, I don't know. But I would urge you strongly away from wanting to find a particular outcome and take the world for what it is and let it draw you to the conclusions that are actually true.
Yeah, Dee-IA, I want to add here that the questions that you're asking are really close to my heart. And something that I've spent a lot of time sort of pondering for myself. When I started to walk away from religion, I definitely feel as if I got there kind of intellectually before I started to really get there emotionally, before I was really ready to sort of shut that door for myself. And that was in large part because, okay, there's no God. There doesn't make sense for there to be a God. Like rationally, I'd sort of understood these things, but I still had these deep personal experiences that I didn't know what to do with. One of the first pieces that started to fall away to kind of break down that wall for me was spending time with the worship group at the church that I was attending. And I started to realize that the people who would go up there and really become filled with the Holy Spirit and could really like usher us into the presence of God weren't really living the most godly lives. And there would be people who I knew were really passionate about their faith, but would get up on that stage and I would have a very hard time finding that, quote, spiritual experience. When we did Secular Sexuality, I had the opportunity to interview a former worship minister who talked in detail about some of the kind of manipulative practices that go into that field and the way that music can be used to really manipulate people's emotional experiences. I mean, there are folks on the crew here at the ACA who can mix sound and who can tell you all about the ways that you can kind of occasion a spiritual experience just by turning the right knob on the right dial at the right time.
There are sciences between these things. It's the reason why pop music's so popular. There is literally a formula for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I
Uh-huh.
started to study hypnosis and some of these other things, I began to recognize just how fallible our consciousness is. You know, we sort of imagine ourselves as being like a brain or a hard drive attached to a video camera, just documenting everything around us and then having a computer process it. And the reality is, consciousness is much more fallible than all of that. There's so
Yeah.
many things that can completely change our experiences of reality. Even if we allow for the idea that objective reality exists out there, and we can spend a lot of time doing the, philosophy on that concept. But if we start from that place, we see very plainly that our experiences of reality are not reliable by any means. That doesn't mean that you didn't have these experiences. How you feel is how you feel, but how we explain those experiences and then the implication of those experiences. Did I pass out and fall under the power of the Holy Spirit because God moved within me? Or did I do it because I hadn't had anything to eat today and I had been in a small room without good air circulation, locking my knees and singing and dancing for 2 hours? One of those seems to be much more likely when we approach it through a scientific lens. And I think that there are meaningful implications to what kind of notions we draw out of an experience like that. It doesn't mean that what you felt isn't what you felt, and what you felt really does matter, even if it doesn't necessarily lead you on the straightest path towards capital T truth.
Mhm. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And really actually taking to heart I watch Matt Dillahunty in Forest, and I think this is the first time I've actually heard spoken with you, Christy, but I've definitely heard Jaimie. And I know that wanting something to be true is not, you're not using your reasoning faculties that way well when you're doing that, and that's not what I want to do.
It's hard
So thanks
because
for
if you
reminding
use
me
your
of that.
reasoning faculties, I mean, I had this recently. I lost a close member of my family, and I desperately want. Oh, it's in the past now. But as an example, I desperately wanted there to be more. Like, it's not fair that someone so vital and necessary for the world to be is gone. And so I thought rationally, and I worked through it rationally, and what it left me with was a big hole, a big, deep, yawning, empty hole where reason refused to give me any easy answers or comfort. That's what, when we go ahead and start filling it in with friends and family and experiences and joy. And because I don't believe there is anything beyond the end of my life, all of those experiences, all of that joy comes from here, from now. So that's what I'd encourage you to do. Let go the promise of an afterlife. Embrace the now. It's awesome.
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you. Thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking your trauma head on, not invalidating it, not just writing it off as whoa, it's just an appearance in consciousness. What does it really matter? It does matter. It impacted you in meaningful ways, but being curious about what that really means and what the implications are. I hope that we've done something to shine some light on that, and that you are getting some support in making sense of all of these experiences. Thank you so much for giving us a call today.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take good care. Yeah, Jaimie, there is a lot of overlap in conversations about mental health and about religious belief and some of these things. And, we as atheists often like to kind of turn things the other direction and say that people with a religious belief are just mentally ill. And I don't think that that is a useful framework. I don't think that that does a lot to help people understand these very real experiences that they're having, because the experience is valid. The experience is real, even if the implications are maybe ungrounded from reality or detached from what we see as like objectively true.
Well, yeah, it's like if I went around saying the sky is green, people would think I'm crazy. But if everyone I ever trusted said that the sky was green, my parents told me the sky was green. They also told me that if I don't believe the sky is green, terrible things will happen to me and my family. Then the sky's fucking green until you really, and I mean really, prove that it ain't green. Because that's my family's eternal souls on the line right there. So you better come with the goods. And that's what we try and do. But like, these are big barriers to pull down.
Sure. Yeah, well, in that vein, I want to acknowledge a super chat by Sean Isherwood saying, "I'm furious. Some prick on Quora just implied my schizophrenia is my own atheist fault, calling it a spiritual condition that psychology mishandles." And I hear a lot of that. I think that that is such a terrible, harmful way of approaching these ideas. And it really breaks my heart to know that somebody would have that experience, because whether we choose to approach the world through a psychological lens or through a spiritual lens or a religious lens or whatever else, with psychology, we have the opportunity to offer relief. We have the opportunity to offer relief in a way that is replicable, in a way that is grounded in material science. We have the opportunity to really offer some amount of healing and of succor, whereas religion is a very mixed bag. You know, to go back to that spiritual healing idea from earlier, sure, some people may feel better if they choose to embrace these ideas, but not in a way that is reliable, not in a way that is consistent with reality, and not in a way that's going to work for, honestly, the vast majority of people.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would like to say is that fury, that cold rage, is completely justified. Like we can't not feel that way when someone condescendingly says that something that is so intrinsic to us, but we have no impact on, as speaking as a disabled person, is somehow our fault or the fault of our parents or our society. You are the way you are because of who you are or what you are or what you believe. And I'm like,
you were born inherently sinful, and every single problem that you have ever had stems from that idea. But good news, I have a cure-all solution that you can only get from me directly. And I'm going to need you to give me 10% of your income. I'm going to need you to give me all power and control over your sexual relationships, over your family relationships, over the way you eat, or any of number of great things. It's heartbreaking to see. And it's, you know, why I'm glad to be here spending my Sundays with you, Jaimie.
Yeah, same here. So that's my thought on that. I really hate. It actually causes me rage, and that's when we have to dig into those tool sets, as you were saying, like therapy and modern mental health practices build tool sets to deal with emotion. Religion, I find, just tells you like one rote way to deal with it. That is not a one size fits all. Like imagine instead of a person who's built a lot of IKEA furniture sitting down with you with the instructions for your new like shelving unit and taking you through it one step at a time and going, this is how you do it. Here's the picture. This is why it's that way. Imagine a person shouting at you from the other side of the room the generic instructions for their sideboard they built last year. And if you get it wrong, oh, no, that's a paddling. You know, that's what religion is to me. Someone else yelling the wrong IKEA instructions at you. And if you don't do what they say, they'll hit you.
Yeah, and telling you that it is your fault that you're not able to solve these issues using the tools that just so happen to work for them, or maybe didn't work for them, but that they were so emotionally invested in that they can't fully acknowledge that truth.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we do have some other calls on the line. We also have some lines open. So I do hope that while we still have a little bit of time left in the show, you'll hit us up at 512-991-9242. But before we jump back into the phone banks, I'm very curious, Jaimie, if you are, to check out a voicemail that was left here at the ACA. Let's see if our crew can get that pulled up for us.
We don't get this in advance. This is entirely unscripted.
You and I are responding to this blind.
If you look at alcoholic prohibition in the 1920s, one extreme was no one will drink alcohol, period, 100% prohibition. The opposite of that is not, gee, some people can drink if you want to drink, and nobody, and if you don't want to drink, you don't have to drink. The opposite of no one drinks is everyone has to drink some amount of alcohol. I think the same analogy could be applied to abortion. That at one extreme you have prohibition of abortion and no one's allowed to be able to have an abortion. The middle position is if you want to have an abortion, you can have an abortion. If you don't want to have abortion for whatever reason, you don't have to have abortion. The opposite of pro-life is not pro-choice. The opposite of pro-life is pro-death, which would be everyone that wants to have a child has to have a minimum of one abortion in their lifetime, or maybe one abortion for every live birth. There's that idea, a couple other ideas on abortion that I think that I would like to get out there so that people can see how extreme these pro-life people are when women are going to die because they're not able to access an abortion.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time following. Is the notion
thin
here,
end of the edge, like the
ultimate slippery slope is the notion that there are folks going around forcing people to drink irresponsibly, our previous conversations about alcohol notwithstanding, or forcing people to get abortions here in the United States?
This is weird. Like, the opposite of pro-life is anti-life, and it's like, no, we call you anti-choice and we're pro-choice. It's like, first of all, there's a whole semantics thing. There's a whole problem with like defining things. Secondly, I've not seen a straw man that big since the last time I watched The Wicker Man.
Yeah, I'd like to think that the caller is trying to point that out, that this voicemail is meant to suggest that there is space between nobody drinks and everybody is forced to drink, that there's space between nobody gets an abortion and everybody has to have an abortion. But it wasn't super clear to me, and I definitely relate that is seemingly the messaging that we often get, that is the idea that people who are pro-choice are somehow forcing abortions on people, and I'd love to recognize that that's not the reality.
I trust the science. I trust the science of people that we know, like practicing doctors like Dr. Ben, who like just know this shit. It's like, you know what happens when you quote unquote terminate a late stage pregnancy? Mm-hmm. You have a birth. A birth is an abortion. It is the termination of a pregnancy. Like, just the misunderstanding of the science and medicine behind it, combined with people's pre-existing notions. Mm-hmm. It's such a minefield. I just like, what do the latest, most knowledgeable doctors say? I'll go with them. They tend to be more right than wrong, and they've done more good for me in my life than any other demographic probably has, except maybe people who make cartoons in Japan.
Sure. Well, let's take this brief pause to thank our top 5 patrons this week. Every week, we like to honor the 5 people who are in the leaderboard on contributing at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. This week in the top spot is Oops All Singularity. Number 2, Devor Valjean. Dingleberry Jackson in the 3rd spot. Kalevi Helveti in number 4, and Left in the Leaves in the number 5 spot. This week's honorable mention is Dion Lachey.
Excellent list of people. Some familiar names, and good on you for getting the mention, but we literally couldn't do what we do without you.
Sure. Yeah, very much so. And to that end, we are excited again to announce the return of our popular brick fundraiser. After the overwhelming success of that first round, we're opening up another opportunity for people to permanently leave their mark by purchasing an engraved brick. You can contribute to the mission of the ACA, and we'll place your brick in a beautiful patio that showcases the heartfelt messages of our generous donor. Each brick will be inscribed with your personalized text, making it a lasting tribute to your support. Join us in building a space that celebrates our community and the impact of your contributions. You can get yours at tiny.cc/ACA bricks. And Jaimie, if folks saw the episode of Talk Heathen that we did last week live in the studio, there was a number of those bricks featured. I got to say, they're much more handsome than I anticipated. The engraving looks good.
And I may well be tempted to, because I chipped in on a communal brick last time, but I think I might get one of my own next time. Just put in forbidden calamari served here.
Forbidden calamari served here. I love that. All right. Well, that housekeeping out of the way, let's talk to Benjamin in Alabama, who seems to have some evidence of God's existence. Benjamin, what do you got for us?
Yeah, well, I was going to call in. I talked to some of y'all last week, and they was daring me to call in about incest and the Bible and stuff. And so I thought about that, but then I'm like, nah. And so I decided to call in about God instead. And I was
okay. Well, tell us what you got.
So I was going to make a case that God is more likely, because of historical evidence, all the gods throughout history, polytheism and all of that stuff, that there's more likely, if not the Tristan God, there's still a God.
All right, you've got some historical evidence for God. What is it?
Well, I was going to use like the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and then Sumerian god text, Dead Sea Scrolls.
Let's start with just one of those. How does the existence of Egyptian hieroglyphics evidence that there is any god?
Well, a lot of the hieroglyphics depict people coming from the sky, visiting people, advanced technologies, knowledge given, advanced knowledge that was given to people. And then you also have like Horus and some of the other gods of Egypt that similar to the Greek gods and the Roman gods.
Sure. There's some perhaps covalent evolution there. There's perhaps some interactions there. But tell me how the existence of Egyptian hieroglyphics depicting God or depicting these sort of from their perspective sci-fi technologies is meaningfully different from modern day Spider-Man comics depicting the existence of mutants and people with superpowers policing New York City. What's the difference between those two things?
Well, I would say that basically, well, I would say that there's a big difference between it because, like, for example, the magazines that have Spider-Man in them, or the comic books, I should say, that have Spider-Man in them, that's not, how to explain this? So that's not historical, throughout decades of having all these different characters, deities, talking about different things and giving knowledge to people and then having people in Egypt build pyramids and build all this other stuff.
So if we pick something that's older than like a modern Spider Day comic and we look at the writings of like Jules Verne or Mary Shelley, and we see that for decades now, we have had people discussing these futuristic technologies, how is that different from people inscribing, information about Anubis on a temple wall in Egypt some 2 or maybe even 3,000 years ago, beyond that even?
Well, it's not. So I was going to combine that with the gods of Rome and the Greek gods, and because if you look at all of these deities, not even just all the deities, but all of the societies that throughout centuries have had different gods, even Sumerian. I was going to bring up Samaria and Mesopotamian even.
Right.
But
so that part of the argument is actually really interesting to me, Benjamin. I don't mean to cut you off, but we have spoken a little bit fairly recently, and so I want to really look at that form of rationality. When I ask you a question, you say that you don't, well, they're different, but how do I explain it? But, well, I guess, but I wanted to bring in these other things. And now we're just sort of adding on and adding on and adding on more and more claims, but we don't know if any of the individual claims are actually made up of accurate or useful information. Just because you have 500 things that could be true doesn't mean that you are any more accurate than if you have one thing that could be true. If you have one thing that is true, now we can really get somewhere. Now we can build an argument, because it's important that our arguments be built on things that are true, not on one thing or 500 things that could be true. So I really want to ask you, is there one thing, one piece of evidence from history or really from anywhere else that is true that demonstrates the existence of God?
People worshiping polytheistic societies throughout history.
Yeah, so people all around the world throughout history have come to different understandings of the possible existence or non-existence of God. That's just people talking, yeah? How does that evidence the existence of anything?
Can I just jump in here?
Please, Jaimie.
Benjamin, first of all, I'm a little disappointed that you're still calling us. I was hoping you'd have a bit more introspection as to why you believe the things you believe before engaging again. But beside the point, by your criteria as to the existence, veracity, and power of God or Jesus, I can prove that wizards are real. Because all you're bringing is a number of books written after or around the time that these events are supposedly to have happened, describing unnatural things that couldn't possibly happen in the natural world, but giving a reasonable, internally logistically sound explanation. But I've just described the Bible and the Dresden Files. The proof you're giving me that Jesus was real and did miracles is the same proof I could give you that a man in a trench coat fired fireballs outside of the Shed Aquarium in 1997. Like, they're just stories on a page, man. And they have no more significance historically than anything that can't be corroborated with actual physical evidence.
Well, I was calling to make a case that a God, not necessarily that the God of the Bible, but just the God in general would be real. And so I figured I could use the hieroglyphics in Egypt and all the other historical monuments and statues and altars and stuff from different cultures.
Benjamin, what causes the common cold?
A virus?
Exactly. How long have we known that a virus causes a common cold? 200 years, maybe? 150?
Well, I would say
100?
Since early 1800s.
Okay, so 200 years max. I'm sure someone will fact check me. So let's say that human civilization's been going on for 6,000 to 10,000 years. Would that not then mean that the vast majority of humans that have ever lived were wrong about why they got coughs and sneezes sometimes?
Well, originally, why they used to say bless you when you sneeze?
Yeah, they were wrong because we know why it's caused.
Yeah. Why
And so
none of
you
it
calling on Antiquity, oh, because there were other gods and because the Egyptians made pyramids and hieroglyphics and stuff, therefore some kind of god must exist. No, just humans are spectacularly good at being wrong because we're pattern matching machines, basic, very, very oriented around personal survival, and that our social evolution has far outpaced our biological evolution by orders of magnitude. We are dumb, hairless apes living in a world of emails and virtual reality.
Benjamin, when we hang up here in just a moment, my real hope is that you would walk away from this with at least one new understanding, which is that 500 things that are kind of true or could be true or might be true are not nearly as useful as one singular thing that is true. And to take something that you sort of half understand and pull from a million different baskets really just clouds the issue. And I don't mean to single you out for it. It's a really common, it's a common rhetorical device, but I think more likely it's just a common form of cognitive dissonance. It's something that we all do when we're trying to justify something that we already believe. We pull from all of these different things. You get into an argument with a friend or with your partner, and you know that you're wrong, but you don't really want to know it, so you don't really want to accept it, or you're just trying to convince yourself that you're not wrong. You'll find 500 things that your partner has done or said that you just want to kind of all drag into the argument. And it doesn't mean that the singular piece of the singular question on the table is still changed in any way. I hope that you will find one piece of information that you feel meaningfully evidences God, and then question that. And if you still hold on to it after looking at that one thing, that you'll really examine it and then maybe give us another try. But you can't just grab at a million different things, throw them all into a blender and say, yeah, something in there's got to float to the surface. Something in there's got to be true, I guess. I hope that you'll really meaningfully consider that notion.
I enjoy interacting with you, Benjamin. You're a very reasonable person. But I'm going to start asking you, why are you calling? And if your answer is not sufficient, like there's a good reason for why you bothered to call, I'm going to start curtailing calls because you are better than this.
I hope that we've been fair. I hope that some of that sinks in. And I do really appreciate you wanting to engage with us on these issues. But I do, like Jaimie said, need you to dig a little bit deeper intellectually, emotionally, and just in your sincerity. And I do hope that we can have a meaningful conversation in the future.
Okay.
Take good care. All right. Well, Jaimie, I hope that question that we asked at the beginning of this show, are atheists fair to theists, that we have done our best to be fair and to honor some of these things. But yeah, it is important when people see that they have such a strong reaction to the conversations that you and I are having, that reaction be then met with curiosity, with a little bit of skepticism and a willingness to engage with rationality.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm being hard on Benjamin because I'm seeing in him things about myself I'm not particularly proud of. I
hear that. We all make these types of cognitive dissonance and mental leaps. Please.
Well, I used to be a caller into the show regularly, and sometimes I called in just to call. I didn't really have a great point to talk on. And while I would never discourage someone from calling for whatever reason, if you are calling back multiple times just to talk and you don't really have a point to give, we're not newbies at this. We're going to take your part and it won't be fun. So please do bring us your A game.
Yeah, well, I hope that Mr. B here in Texas has brought his A game and can move the conversation forward a little bit. Mr. B, what is on your mind this weekend?
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking my phone call.
Howdy.
I'm a little nervous. So I used to be a Christian, grew up in the church all my life, and one thing that I learned about God is that He's all powerful, all knowing. And with that being said, you brought it up earlier about salvation, and that's something now that when I look at salvation, it just makes no sense at all. And I say that from the standpoint of if God created mankind before the foundation of the world, He knew that man was going to sin. He knew that Satan was going to tempt man, and why go through the process of creating Satan, and also why go through the process of creating this world when God could have created a perfect world? We didn't have to go through the byproduct of salvation, Jesus died on the cross, and go through faith. And then my second part to this is when I speak to people that are believers, and I explain to them, I try to explain to them, it's like a case study when you read a book. It's like looking at the characteristics of God and focus on His attributes and what He's able to do and not able to do. And I say, well, my issue is I put the blame on God, but they say that, well, it's not God, it's free will that we mess it up. And my rebuttal to them is like, we're not talking about humans, we're talking about God has the ability because He's, all powerful and all knowing. With those two attributes, he knew this before the salvation process was put in effect. And I hope what I'm saying makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if we take sort of conventional Christian doctrine and really examine it, what we come to very quickly is the inescapable belief that God knowingly created perhaps billions, if not an infinite number of souls, only to see them suffer in eternity forever because they failed to pass a test that He Himself wrote and frankly did a pretty poor job of preparing us for. So, you'll hear a lot of hand waving and a lot of like, well, God works in mysterious ways. And who are you to question the will of God? I mean, He is a Leviathan. You are merely a louse. Like, why would you possibly think that you could understand the mind of God? And on and on and on. But you're not going to hear any of that from me. I think that you have the right of it here. I don't think that there is a reasonable justification for all of this. Certainly there are people on the network who could do a great job of walking you through some of the historicity of the Bible and really talk about sort of when certain things were added and taken out and how Satan is this kind of like late addition to Christian canon and how now we've created this like dualistic God that doesn't really come directly from Judaism. And I mean, there's a lot to be said about how we got to these ideas. But if you take the ideas for truth on their own and then start to examine them, they certainly don't make any like literal, direct, objective sense. Is that a fair framework, Jaimie, for us to start from?
Absolutely. I would say that that many of the beliefs that are held by a lot of Christians are internally inconsistent to the point where I would take it as proof that God does not exist. If your God is the triomni, He doesn't exist, can't exist. And we've known this more than 200 years before Christ was even born, supposedly. So, yeah, I'm on board with you. The idea of a God that isn't... The problem of evil is very much a big defeater in my mind.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry that we can't like better answer your question in a certain sense, but how does that strike you, Mr. B?
It strikes me. I guess if I could ask another question is when the conversation comes up and they in the rebuttal from believers are, well, it's human beings that messed up and it's a problem with free will. How would you go about rebutting that when it comes to free will? Because I don't. Free will is a lazy excuse to me to say that we messed up.
What did the 3-month-old do? What exercise of free will did the 3-month-old do to deserve the brain cancer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a reasonable rebuttal in a lot of ways. For myself, Mr. B, I'll say that I just, as a rule, I don't rebut in that way. I understand that there is a place for intellectual debate and for really hashing these ideas out in meaningful ways. And I'm not encouraging anybody to like shy away from that type of intellectual discussion. But I find that typically when people are calling into the show and certainly my personal experience, it's all about trying to convince somebody of an idea that they're not interested in learning. Now, when my friends and I talk, we can disagree about certain ideas, and then maybe we can exchange some information and then walk away from a different point of view. But it's all based on the assumption that even if we're starting from different places, that we both have a desire to better understand these concepts when we're finished. And if you are in a place where you are debating and rebuttaling with a religious person, with a Christian or somebody who identifies as some other form of theist, then in all likelihood, neither of you are particularly interested in learning something or in walking away with a different point of view. And to me, the whole exercise starts to become exhausting and masturbatory and not particularly effective. And if I may, as a mental health clinician, just encourage you to prioritize your own well-being, peace and joy and connection with other people. Let me just invite you to ask yourself why you would rebut or what the value is in having these conversations at all. Please take that, in the loving way that it's offered.
No, I take that, and I completely appreciate that advice.
Yeah. Are there, particular conversations in your life that you feel challenged by, or maybe people in your life that it feels important would agree with you or at the very least understand you?
It's not a lot because I come from a very, basically almost everybody in my family is religious, and sometimes, and a lot of them know that I don't believe anymore. And sometimes, they'll ask me, well, how come I don't believe, or what will happen? And I try to be honest with them, and I try to explain to them. And sometimes, the conversation goes to, I try to explain why I got to the point where I'm at now. And then, like I said, they'll just go to where they'll just, it comes off as they're just trying to defend what they believe versus actually trying to hear me out, how I got to the point where I'm at. And then at the end of the conversation, they'll be like, well, I'm just going to pray for you that God reveals himself to you. I'm like, but that's not what I'm here for. You asked me why do I not believe? And that's how the conversation usually goes. I don't take it as, I know that they love me and they take it from a place of, it's not from a place of hate or anything like that. And I know the people that do talk to me, they do love me at the end of the day. And we still have, I have a great relationship with my family. So I don't let that particular instance, interfere my relationship with my family or the people that I care about. But sometimes they do just a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Annoying sometimes, knowing that sometimes they feel like they're not really trying to hear me. They just want to prove their point versus, coming to an understanding. Okay, I can accept that.
Yeah. And I just don't have time or space in my own life to have too many of those conversations. Maybe I'm a little grizzled. Maybe I've been doing this with the ACA for too long, but I just feel so exhausted when we go to those places. And like I am maybe interrupting Thanksgiving in a way that doesn't really do much to benefit anybody. So I hear your pain, and I certainly don't mean to chastise. Let me just give you permission to only have the conversations that you feel are benefiting your life in some way or benefiting the lives of others. And knowing that if two people are going to argue about something with no intention of walking away with a different point of view, that you might be able to save your energy and spend that someplace else. But in any case, I can't help but feel like you've got the right of it. The problem of evil and some of these other concepts we've touched on certainly are important.
Thank you. I do appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you so much for giving us a call today. I hope that we've been helpful, even if we are all just kind of agreeing and giving you a thumbs up here. But you have a great weekend.
Well, thank you for taking the time to answer my call, and I appreciate your advice and your feedback to you and to both of the hosts.
No problem.
For sure. We appreciate you.
Well, before we move any further, Richard, do you mind if I just quickly hijack this here stream?
Please do.
Because we got a couple of superb chats coming in. One from long-time supporter Miranda Rensberger. Member for 6 months, $10. When we bring up the problem of evil, Christians are very eager to tell us we can't know the mind of God, but they sure are confident in what they think God thinks. Yeah, God wants this because book says so. Then we also have a super chat from Joe G the First, $4.99. Jaimie's home about the biggest straw man he's seen since the movie Wicker Man was absolutely hilarious. Thank you. Second to the Forbidden Calamari. Coming this summer. A treat for your mouth and your brain. Forbidden Calamari.
Cannibalism, Jaimie. That's why people blame atheists of cannibalism. It's these jokes right here. Thank you for perpetuating these stereotypes with me. What do you say we talk to Denise here in Texas?
How about we do that, shall we?
Yeah. Denise, you wanted to talk a little bit about 12-step programs, a topic I am very passionate about. What was your experience? What's on your mind?
Wow. Okay, so I guess I caught y'all at the right time. So, hi, I'm Denise. And yes, actually, I'm very much grateful for 12-step programs. I've been involved in 12-step programs for a couple of years now, and they really help, saved my life. So this is about my personal experience.
Yeah.
But going in, it wasn't the first time I had ever tried them, but I always ran from them. I went to them early. I needed to at the time. But I didn't understand. I always thought it was sort of a religious thing whenever I would try these meetings. Even the first time I went to one, I was 18. And I went to one, and I remember they were talking about religion. And I'm going to be honest with you, that's what I was running from since I was about 12 years old. Okay? I knew who I was when I was a kid, and so did my family. They saw it, right, when I was a kid. I never thought I was a bad person. I was a person raised in a church. But it just was going against everything I could understand. And then when I started to ask questions, it got violent, and I had to go. So nevertheless, when I came back to 12-step programs this time, I really needed to get whatever it was they were doing. So I went in head first, and I'm going to tell you, the things I learned really helped me. But for me, the religious part wasn't sitting well with me, but I got lucky when I got in this particular time. And I met someone for the first time who was like, oh, you don't have to be a certain type of religious. You don't even have to believe what I believe. You just need to try to stop drinking and figure out how you're going to do that on a daily basis. It was the first time somebody ever spoke to me in this manner. And boy, I took that and ran with it. From there, I hear a lot of people saying, well, where are you going to get your morality from if you don't have religion? But what I got a chance to do when I was able to sober up was to learn some discipline that I didn't get to learn as a child because I was running from the church, and people tried to tell me I'm going straight to hell. And I got a chance to have some peace, learn some science, learn how to take care of myself, learn some, gain some self-awareness and some of the abilities to speak for myself. And I started to slowly question some of this stuff. And boy, oh boy, it became freeing for me. And I say the James Webb Telescope freed my Sundays up. And I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in God. And I still think that 12-step programs are great, but they led me to a different conclusion.
Well, it's interesting when you say about how do you have morality when you don't believe in God? I'd always counter to a religious believer, is there anything in your holy scriptures that you think might be a little bit off? Anything at all? And anyone who's honest will say, well, the whole slavery thing, that's a bit, the whole bashing children's heads against rocks. I'm not big on fan on that. It's like, how did you know that it was wrong if it's presented by a God as a godly action in the Bible? Where are you getting that knowledge from? And they'll either be honest and say, oh, I have an internal logic and I have an internal morality that's influenced by the world around me. Or they go, Satan! I don't know.
I feel like if you're going to say that, I could just add that as a kid, when I'm sitting there in that pew saying to my mom or my grandmother, hey, that doesn't make sense to me, and they're hitting me or pinching me, telling me don't question. I felt like in the same manner that someone would say, well, I felt it, or I've known it. I felt it the same way they felt that it was wrong. It didn't feel right to me that I wasn't allowed to ask questions about this, or that I felt I was a good person and a good kid. I didn't feel like I was going to these crazy places they were telling me about. So I could say the same, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm myself am glad to hear that you found value in these programs. You know, at the top of the show, we talked a little bit about the notion of faith healing and placebos and all of those things. And I don't in the least bit want to say that a 12-step program is a scam or that it is just a placebo. It is a community of people using the best tools available to them to support one another towards meaningful change. And that's a beautiful thing. And we know from research, we know from countless case studies that that is not going to be a universal experience. And that's where my concern around 12-step programs really comes in. The reality is that 12-step programs, even if they nominally don't require a belief in a God figure or some of these things, there really is incredible amounts of pressure to lean in that direction. And especially knowing that these are largely peer-led groups without a whole lot of good oversight or good training in many, many, many circumstances, people are going to be pressured to take on some of these beliefs, and they're going to have negative outcomes. And that's just a thing that is true. And even if we decide to accept all of that, where I start to take umbrage, where I start to get really frustrated, is where our government's relationship with 12-step programs really exists. There are so many people who are court mandated to these types of programs. There are so many different financial relationships between like local and state governments around these types of programs. And a lot of that funding, a lot of that support, a lot of that like judicial overview could be going to programs that are much more evidence-based, could be going to creating research that doesn't rely on some of these like vague faith notions. If it's effective for even one person, then congratulations to that one person. But it is not effective for a great number of people. And we have good reason and evidence to believe that there are other things that could be much more effective. But we have this, forgive the kind of pun, almost religious belief that AA and programs like it are the only thing that can be useful. Even though we know that they can be harmful, even though we know that they aren't useful for everybody, we try so hard to put so many resources into them, denying other programs the opportunity. And that starts to really frustrate me. So I guess I just mean to say, Denise, I'm so glad that you had positive experiences, and I absolutely applaud that and do not wish on any level to take that away from you. But I do have a problem with the way these programs are often the only option, and certainly the only option that has such a complex relationship with our government, which is meant to be kept separate from situations of religious ideology. Does that at all line up with your experience? How does that strike you?
Yeah, so I'll just say quickly, I hear your point, and to that, I'll have to say this time, coming into these, I also was fortunate enough to be able to go into an IOP first, right? So my experience going into a 12-step program when I went back in was I could afford it. I'm glad it was there and it was free. Not everybody's going to have the experience I had. I had to look also for places that were accepting. It was during lockdown. A lot of times I would go into online meetings and be verbally assaulted for my color, my gender, whatever. And then even going into in-person meetings has been a challenge, and I've had to find places to protect my peace. And there can be, and for my own experience, I have experienced people who don't understand that I'm not going all the way down the road, which you would with certain books. Having
Right.
said all that, I'm glad it's available for the people that can't afford other places. I wish and I hope that we could explore other options, because there are other things that do work as well. I was told, take what you need and leave the rest. I'm glad I had that option, right? I know other people don't. I hear you saying court mandated and things. But for me personally, all I know is I'm grateful that I was able to find my own peace and then find my way out of the thing that I think kept me kind of in that addiction for a long time. I think I'm going to burn in hell for loving who I love. And I got free of that. And that's the gift I got, including other things as well. And I thank y'all for chatting with me today.
No, congratulations on all of that. And man, I hate the thought that we would end this conversation with you thinking that I would encourage you to turn your joy into rage. I would just ask you to consider, what if those free programs that you had access to were who are oftentimes being funded by the government and some of these other types of things. If maybe there was a program that was being funded that could have also helped you, that would have been accessible to you, that didn't come bundled with the notion that you're going to burn in hell for being a bad person, that didn't come bundled with there's something wrong with who you love or some of these other things. I'm glad that you were able to take what you needed. I'm so glad that you got what you needed. And I hope that you will kind of join us in at least hoping that we can create a future where you don't have to play that game in the same way.
My only thing about these kinds of programs that have what I would call a central untruth to them, like the abrogation to a higher power that you can no more prove exists than not exist. My thought is the benefit of believing in this lie worth the lie? And what happens when, not if, but when the lie is revealed? What happens then? That's what my worry is. Does all the good work just come crumbling down?
Denise, any comment before we move on?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I lost you for a minute, but no, yeah. So that's why I stay still involved in this program. There are alternatives to strict religious parts of the program, which I often seek out. And like I said, this is a worthwhile thing to actually put my time into. Now, that with a clear mind and head to help other people maybe get to a place where they're not feeling like they're forced to have to be involved in something that doesn't go along with, what would help them be healthy. I've seen people come into these spaces and be so afraid of having to take a pill that they've already swallowed, right? Having to sit through sermons and things that are traumatizing to them. And I've also seen people come at them for saying it. So I'm not saying these spaces are perfect. What I'm telling you is my experiences. Well, I was freed from religion through the ability to stay sober. And I found that in those programs. But I also found people that told me I didn't have to be religious to be in them.
Yeah, well, congratulations on your recovery and all of your growth here. I'm so glad that you got the support that you needed and that there were people in those communities that supported you while also encouraging you to pursue sort of your own understanding of cosmology, your own understanding of God and these things. And thank you for supporting others in their recovery and helping people who don't have a God belief to find that recovery. I really appreciate you giving us a call, and I'm so glad to hear that things are going so much better for you.
Thank you so much. Y'all take care, and thank you for having this show. It's really great that you're taking conversations from everywhere. Yeah, let's hope everybody can get to a place of peace. And I like what you said earlier about prioritizing your peace. I found a lot of help in just those words right there, prioritizing your peace. Thank y'all.
Yeah, so say we all. You have a great day. All right, Jaimie, this was a fun show. I want to remind people that the prompt for next week is, what's an unexpected place for Jesus to appear? You can reply in the comments, tune at the beginning of next week's episode. And then I'd love to say thank you to Richard for being our producer and our backup today, and maybe get some of his thoughts on the show, see what you think, if there was anything that you wanted to add. Really appreciate you taking that time there, sir.
There was, sorry, I dropped my notes. That's why I was briefly off camera there.
Tell us, as the producer, tell us all the things we did wrong. Tell us all the things that you want to work on.
No, you know what? This was a great show. We've had some really good calls. The first caller, feeling good can make you feel good. Yeah, kind of. That's what I had down for that. Dee's normal perception. Yeah, Christy, who talked about this in the call. Normal perception. The normal way our brain works can convince us that religions are true, or supernatural experiences are true. We are prone to making mistakes. Hieroglyphics prove God? Maybe not. Mr.
Maybe
B,
not.
that's all I had for that one, yeah. Mr.
Sure.
B, I suspect, and I'm not going to name names, I suspect that might be one of our previous theist callers. I don't know if it is or not, but the voice was very, very familiar to me.
Yeah.
If it was, then I applaud that caller immensely for making the transition that they have made, if it is the person I'm thinking of, because they came from a place of very bad epistemology to asking really good questions. If it is that person, well done, and I hope you can call back. If it wasn't that person, it was just a great call anyway. And the last caller, regardless of whether it was a 12-step program, however you found your way to a better place within yourself, I'm glad you did it. That was my takeaway from that caller. If you're in a better place, for me, it's largely doesn't really matter how you got there. For you personally, there's bigger questions in the larger scheme of things. But for you personally, I'm just glad you feel you're in a better place. That was kind of my takeaway. My quick rundown. Great show, guys. You both did an amazing job. You really did.
Hey, well, thank you so much for joining us and supporting us in all of this. Thank you to everybody in the crew that we saw earlier who helped to make this happen. Thank you to everybody for watching. If you are watching this live and would like to come and find us at tiny.cc/ACD Discord, we'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, if y'all join me, I just want to remind our audience out there that, if you don't believe, this is your community, and we really do appreciate you being here. If you do believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced. Sending out lots of love. Thank y'all so much.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.